This is the 21.5 Show.
You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Whether you're a professional pilot or want to be one, you're in the right place.
Let's get started.
Join professional aviators Dylan and Max as they talk their experience in the airlines, business aviation, and more.
Life is good.
Industry experts, unique stories, and plenty of fun. This is the 21.5 Show.
Here we go.
Welcome back, folks. Another episode of the 21.5 Show, the show for professional pilots by two professional pilots. My name is Dylan. I am a pilot in business aviation. If you're new, welcome. I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, friend, and brother-in-law, Max. Hello.
Hello, I'm Max. I'm in business aviation as well as an airline guy.
Max, it's been a few episodes since we've been able to kind of share what we've been up to. I've got some updates on my end, and it sounds like you've had a lot of adventures in the sky recently, too.
Just a couple things that were, I don't know. I don't know if comical is the right word, but interesting at least.
Okay.
So I flew up to Kalispell, in the winter here. And it was, lowish ceilings, not that low. And we're holding short of the runway. And I hear this dude get on the radio, and he's in some sort of single engine, I think a 172 or something. He's like, Tower, Cessna, whatever. I'm seeing this freezing report on ForeFlight, and I was wondering if you had any information on the freezing level and intensity of the icing. And the tower's like, he literally keys the mic and goes, we don't have ForeFlight up in the tower or anything like that, so I don't really have anything, any information for you on that. And me and Christian, who I fly with, we look at each other like, oh boy. Like, this is not good, dude. Because it was like the icing, we had just come in to do a pickup. So the icing was like, I knew there was like substantial icing. I mean, for a smaller plane, it would be real bad. Low? Fairly low. Yeah, maybe like 1,500 feet, something like that.
Okay.
And so we look at each other like kind of wide-eyed, and then he clears us for takeoff. So we blast off and we get into the layer. And sure enough, as soon as we get into it, you get like, light to moderate icing probably. And so Christian's flying. So and we climb, and the layer's pretty thin. So we punch through it pretty fast. And I said, Tower, before I go, I just want to give you a pilot report that there's light to moderate rime icing starting at 5,500, extending through 8,700. Temperatures this and this. And the guy goes, okay, copy that. And then you hear the guy in the 172 go, we're just going to go ahead and remain below 5,500. I'm like, dude. It was just like, but I remember being that dude, right? Like, yeah, getting to be a long time ago now, but it's just one of those things you learn with experience. And it's weird, like, oh boy, like this guy could, and there's mountains around, it's like, what?
Roger
we tried to do our good deed pie rep. Yeah. Well, listen, that guy, that's another level of luck.
Good. Look at you.
I've also started having Roger pick my lottery numbers too. So
yeah, it's perfect. It's smart. So, okay, good deed. I appreciate that. Do you have any grievances to air on any on the other end of the spectrum?
Yeah. So we flew up to Telluride a couple weeks ago for President's Weekend, and so we're sitting there, and it's a pretty busy ski weekend. So we're going to depart on Monday afternoon, right? President's Day, and we're holding short next to a fractional operator that has to depart IFR. Generally, it wasn't IFR, but it's always one in, one out. It's uncontrolled if you've never been Telluride, so it can be a lot of delay to get in and out if you're IFR. So a lot of times people, especially 91, they will cancel if they're coming in or depart VFR and just pick up your clearance, right?
Yeah.
So I'm behind this dude, and there's like one last little taxiway entrance, and then there's the end. So I'm like, I was sitting here, I'm like, God, I wonder if I should stop short here so I could just like taxi on the runway if this guy screws around. And we're like, whatever. So we pull forward, and we hear him go. We kind of come in late to the conversation that was going on the radio, and the guy goes, traffic on final. We have a release time here of whatever. He's like, how far out are you? And the guy's like, we're on a 15. This is a guy in a Cirrus, mind you. Okay. So you get an idea of the speed. He's like, we're on a 15-mile final. And you hear the fractional guy sitting there, and he goes, okay. I think we're just going to hold short till you land. And I'm like, what?
And you're behind him. So you're
I'm stuck now. Now we're committed. Yeah. So I obviously started losing my mind. And
are you in the right seat at this point?
No, I was in the left seat.
Oh, okay.
So I'm like, you got to be kidding. Even Christian was like, dude, what is this guy doing? And so the guy in the Sears goes, well, you have plenty of time. I can offset for you if that makes you feel more comfortable. And I'm like, so we start laughing. And the guy's like, we're just going to hold short and wait for you to land. And I go on there. I'm like, look, dude, if you miss your release time, you're going to have to taxi back on the runway because we cannot wait for you to get another release. Like, that was the nicest thing, basically, I could say. And so we waited there. And the guy made his release time by like 30 seconds. He's rushing to get out. I'm like, this is so stupid. What are we? Always err on the side of safety, I suppose. But it was just like, that's just egregious.
Well, listen, especially if you don't operate in and out of there a lot. I get it.
Well, it's just, totally, for sure. And I'm getting all upset, but I really wasn't in that big of a hurry, to be very frank. I'm just like, well, maybe I should.
It is what
relax
it is.
A little.
Would you like to award you mentioned your co-pilot and our friend Christian? Would you like to take a minute to recognize his accomplishment during the arrival into Telluride?
Oh yeah, Chris. So this was Christian's first time. He's been in there twice, and the first time I flew and we had to circle, that was when you did the lav cam. You should post that video. That was pretty funny. Dylan was on the potty seat in the back narrating a video out the window of the lav while we're circling over Mountain Village at like 400 feet.
Circling to land. It's a long story. Yeah.
He goes, coming live from the lav cam on the 2-7 man circle. It's pretty funny. You have to post that. But so we came in. And, normally I would say a lot of people, they go in the FMC and you type in the landing, it tells you your landing distance, right? And you're like, okay, we're good. Wet, dry, whatever. But we were landing because we're trying to take enough gas to go round trip. And so we're landing and we had loaded up, every seat full, like the baggage compartment was full, like positive pressure to close the door, kind of full.
Yeah.
And so we run the numbers on the iPad of the actual of SESCOM, like the performance charts for the airplane. And we're good on everything except for we're exceeding brake energy because there's like a 4-knot tailwind. Because oftentimes people in Telluride will always land with a tailwind at least up to 10. Some people more, it seems like, but because they don't want to do that circle over the rising terrain. But yeah, so it wasn't that bad of a tailwind. It was well under 10 knots, but it was making us exceed our maximum brake energy. Because you're high altitude, true airspeed's high, for those. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, Christian, you get to do the man circle. So he executed the man circle at the 2-7. I mean, it's really not that big of a deal.
Shouldn't we change the name, the Air Mission Circle?
Yeah, it was awesome too, because our friends, all of our buddies that we were meeting up there were at the mid-mountain kind of outdoor bar.
Oh yeah.
So you see it like right from there. It's a great view. So they saw him do the circle. He executed it to perfection.
Well done. So here's a funny side story. I was sitting in, I can't remember, where was I in training? I can't remember where I was. I was in the hotel and I pulled up my laptop and I knew you guys were flying up there. And I was like, I wonder if they're going to do the circle to 2-7. So I pulled up the live stream, I think on Flight Radar 24. And so I was like, oh, cool, they are. And so I started an Instagram live video. I think it was just Joel watching. I don't know if we had more than that.
It was.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, everybody, Max always talks about circling to 2-7. Let's follow along. And as he circles to 2-7. So we're watching the plane and it's like, sure enough, you like swing to the south of the airport and set up because you do a left traffic pattern. And so we're following the airplane going along. I'm like, okay, cool. And then the airplane just comes to a mountain and stops.
And then disappears.
I'm like, oh. And I'm like, no, it didn't disappear. It just stayed there.
Oh,
not
really?
moving. And I'm like, oh, well, it's probably just bad coverage there or something. Meanwhile, all three of us tuned in. We're like, oh, what's going on? So I ended the live stream and then I had to like search around. I finally found a webcam of the Telluride airport ramp. And then I was like, and then I re-live streamed like a picture of you guys like unloading the airplane into the van. So everyone knew you were safe. But, so that's the last time I live streamed a circle to land, I think. But,
I was prepared to write up like a press release saying,
exactly.
great aviation podcaster.
We regret to inform you that
celebrated aviation broadcaster. Anyway, so that's the last time I
number one podcast in Azerbaijan host has
top 40 aviation disaster. So, anyways, those are good stories.
I got one more. More.
Good.
It's been a very storied couple weeks.
Yeah,
few weeks, I guess. So I'm landing late at night. Not late, like whatever, 10:30 or something like that. Late for me. I don't like those PMs. But so I'm landing back in Phoenix, last leg of my trip, and it was later. So Phoenix Approach had some frequencies combined. So normally when you're coming to Sky Harbor, you don't necessarily hear a lot of the stuff that's going on north of town in Scottsdale. But obviously I fly out of there in business aviation and have for a long time. So very familiar with that. So he had those two frequencies combined. So I couldn't hear the pilots that were on that frequency, but the controller, you could hear him transmit, right? For if he was talking on that frequency or ours, it was transmitting on both, right? So I hear him trying to talk to this dude, a fractional pilot that is having a hard time finding the airport. And the airport is very hard to find at night, irregardless. Like it's just, even when we fly in there, right where the airport is, but you can't necessarily see the airport. Like it's a thing. It's because of the way the lighting is, I guess, or whatever. But it's just really hard to see at night. So, so he's so he's having a hard time finding. He's like, I still don't have it. And the controllers, he doesn't. He goes, okay, if you can't pick it up, I'm going to have to turn you off. And all of a sudden, you hear the controller come back on. All right, turn left to a heading of whatever and climb, maintain this. I'll set you back up. He vectors him back around and I'm just cruising in on the arrival. It takes forever. It feels like in Phoenix. And so I'm just cruising around, listen to all this. And then he tries it again. He's like, it's right there. You'll see a bend. The controller even goes, you'll see the freeway will curve around to the west. Yeah. It's right inside of the freeway. There is the airport. And he doesn't see it again. The guy's like, okay, climb up and do this. And he's like, we try one more time, or I guess I'll have to clear you for the instrument approach, but it gets you to because the approach is a circling approach. It doesn't get you very low. So it's about the same as the minimum vectoring altitude where he's kind of putting them. And so controller's kind of running out of options here about what to do. So he vectors him back out, and I'm listening to all this. And the captain I'm flying with, he was flying. And I go, are you listening to this guy that can't find the airport? He's like, yeah, this is insane. I go, watch this. And I go to COM 2 because this has happened before. Like kind of light bulb went off in my head. Yeah, I tuned in the CTAP because the tower's closed at Scottsdale at this point too, because it closed at like 9 or 10 or whatever. And so I go on there, and he's coming in, and I click it 7 times to light the airport lights up. And then all of a sudden, like maybe 30 seconds later, the guy goes, all right, we have the field in sight. He's like, okay, good, clear for the visual approach. So he just forgot to turn the runway lights on, which has happened. Like, it's certainly not the first, nor will he be the last. But no. And I didn't even pick it up until like later on. I'm like, I wonder if this dude turned the runway lights on. And then we had a pretty good chuckle on that one.
So, I mean, you're just out here helping airmen in need all over the place.
Really, Dylan, I've really decided to give back to aviation at this point in my career. Aviation's given me a lot, so it's really time to.
This is great. Wow. All right. This is the Max Appreciation episode.
Yeah, I'm actually starting my own podcast. I forgot to tell you about my giving back. I'm going to start recording this. I'm starting a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And Instagram will all be just talking to my phone constantly now. Yeah. I'm going to be an influencer. Yeah, the Nippa show. No, you can get paid off YouTube, bro.
Oh, okay. That's right. Okay, yeah. I would never accuse you of that. Wow. Unbelievable. Well, a true such an altruistic airman here joining us today. It's unbelievable. If you need help, Mac, he's kind of like Batman. He's just sort of around in the ether.
Yeah, I mean, when you possess just the breadth of knowledge that I do about aviation, Dylan, it's really, you can't just hold that in. You really have to give back.
Yeah.
So,
last thing from you. You kept saying that you're going to do this book corner, and we're going to learn about, longitude and all this stuff. What are you reading right now for any of those?
I know. I kind of
ready to go on spring break.
I think I've mentioned this before about I've always been super interested in learning about the pilot that started at, I say Pan Am. It could have been any airline, I guess, but Pan Am that started flying like on the recip airplanes, and ended his career on the 747. Like that's a lot. Yeah, that's not like starting on the Airbus and ending on the 787. Like it's a little different. Big jump. So I mean, think about that. The first time you ever fly a jet is maybe a 747. I don't know. That's what it seemed, or maybe a 707. I don't know. So anyway, I just started reading this book. I had to like buy it used because I couldn't find it anywhere. But it's called For Pilot's Eyes Only, and it's about a guy that started flying at Pan Am on the DC-3 and ended his career on the 747. So it should be pretty. I just started it yesterday, so I'm not that far into it. But it's pretty funny. He got his job at Pan Am. He like walked up there and was like, "Hey," and they're like, "Oh yeah, we need pilots," and he didn't even have an instrument rating. So we got to Pan Am, and his pay went from $200 a month to $225 a month when he got his instrument rating. So he was pretty excited about that.
Huge.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the new Delta TA.
Oh, that's the other thing. We haven't talked about the DC-3, did we?
Cancel the guest for this episode, Joel. I think we're just going to interview Matt.
Yeah, you guys, let's just start over. You guys just interview me, please, okay? Did you tell everybody about the DC-3 ride you managed to miss again?
We talked about that last episode.
No.
Yeah.
Dylan, never missing an opportunity to miss an opportunity.
Really appreciate that.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
This week, a Super Constellation is flying in while you're at work, and we're just going to take that around the patch.
Exactly.
So I hope you're not upset.
They're doing
the space shuttle. We're going to just do it.
Oh, we said that at the exact same time.
We're so in sync.
I love it.
It's unbelievable.
So I have a quick update on my end. I got a new job, flying a new airplane, and just finished training.
Yeah.
Couple thoughts. First off, so I'm flying a Challenger 350 now, which is a little rocket ship. It's like a little sports car. It's the first time in my career I'm flying an airplane with like excess power. Like,
really?
Yeah. I mean, think about it. So 172, no. Duchess, no. Seminole, no. Saab 340, no. Embraer 145, no. Beach Jet, no. King Air 200, not really. Challenger 6.
How do you judge an airplane that has excess power?
Like, because you can climb at more than 1,000 feet a minute above like 35,000 feet.
One of the ways I've always thought about that is that it's an airplane where when you level off at like in the high 30s or 40s or whatever, you have to make a significant power reduction. Whereas you remember those other airplanes, you just leave it at
You're
to accelerate.
No, it's the opposite.
Yeah, that's the difference between an airplane with power and one without. But obviously, it climbs like a rocket ship and everything else.
Yeah, a rocket ship. So I'm in my first sports car. It's only taken me, 25 years of professional flying to get there, but did it.
Are you behind the airplane,
That's
Dylan?
Awesome.
Are you able to keep up with all of this performance at this point?
We're there. I'm getting my feelers out there, but I'm learning. I appreciate, we've had some listeners reach out and give me some tips on the 350. Somebody sent me a good checklist, so appreciate it. So if you got any advice on the Challenger 300, 350, I'm in learning mode. But let me tell you this, Max. I had probably the best initial training event I've ever received in business aviation up at Montreal, at the CAE facility up there that was formerly Bombardier. And it's funny because I had the people that you talk to in the Bombardier world, there's mixed sentiment about going to training there because, it's strict and they're tough there and they will yell at you or whatever they say. It was not that at all, but it was excellent because it was the closest I've experienced to 121 training in the business aviation world, where they have like call outs and procedures and they want you to stick with it. And it makes training so much easier when the instructor, has some structure. So big shout out to those guys. I really enjoed it. And everyone in our
You picked a perfect time of year to go to Montreal too. So I bet that was nice.
February in Montreal is incredible. Definitely if you get the chance to go there. It's funny, because, if you're in business aviation, one of the most important things you do like on any trip is like selecting your hotel, the points,
big time.
What's the location? Am I walking?
Especially for a long-term training event. I mean, that's your place of residence for weeks.
So I do all my work and talk to everybody, I'm calling people. I'm doing everything that you do. Pick this Marriott. I'm okay. This is great. Get there. It's got an outdoor parking lot, and
like many hotels,
like every hotel, it's snowing 6 inches a day. I'd have to walk down 40 minutes early, start the car, go have breakfast, and clean it. I mean, it was just ridiculous.
Did you bring ski gloves with you on this training event?
No, I had like thinner gloves. Yeah, it was a big mistake. I mean,
so you're out there scraping.
Scraping, and there's snow's piled up next to the car, so like every time you get in and out of the car, your shoes are covered. So anyways, one of the guys in our class was smart, and he found a hotel with a heated parking garage. And
he looked for one, or was that just dumb luck?
He was smart enough. He was from the Northeast.
He must live somewhere where it's cold.
Yeah,
he probably doesn't live in Phoenix, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, about 2 days into the class, the whole class moves to this hotel just because of the heated parking garage. So I'm just going to say, like, that's a new kind of wrinkle to things.
I would not have considered the heated parking garage as an important box to check on my long-term training hotel.
So shout out to the guys that were smart enough to figure that out, and I hitched along. So anyways, training was awesome. I can't say enough great stuff about CAE Montreal, and I'm not paid to say that either. It was just a good experience. So
good. All right.
Onwards and upwards. We have such a great show today. Joel set us up with the folks at Mission Aviation Fellowship, and we got to learn a little bit more about what it's like to be a missionary pilot. In the interview, Max, we mentioned kind of everyone. I think most professional pilots have heard about it and sort of know it exists, but what exactly they do is a little bit of a mystery. So we got to learn. I know I learned a lot.
I kind of knew. I think people know the basics of what they do.
Yeah.
I think what's more interesting is how they do it, how they run their deal there, and the whole operation was very eye opening to me.
Exactly. Look forward to that conversation with Chad from Mission Aviation Fellowship. And we've got lots of good stuff in the mailbag and beyond. Joel, any reviews we need to be aware of?
From the Apple Podcast side, Dylan and Max run the best podcast in town for transitioning military pilots. The episodes are hilarious and packed with information, a lot of which is brand new for someone who's only ever flown on the military side. It's great to learn about the variety of professional pilot careers out there, especially for someone targeting a transition from military to 121. 5 stars. M. Cosmo.
Ooh, nice. Send us an email with your address and we'll send you some stickers. Thank you for that great review.
Next, I really enjoyed this podcast. The guests are well thought out and the topics are very relevant. I am more enlightened to the industry after each episode. 5 stars by Outfits.
Thank you, Outfits.
Next one. Are you sure that producer is the right choice? The voice is like nails on a chalkboard.
From anonymous jackass. That's the best. Joel, don't get your feelings hurt. You don't sound like nails on a chalkboard.
That title might have been added afterwards.
Oh.
Someone on the production team might have put that
Joel,
in there. Okay.
did you get your feelings hurt?
Hey,
Listen.
just got to take it. Thanks for writing in.
He sacrificed his body. He smoked 2 packs a day unfiltered cigarettes to get his voice to where they're at. Like, listen, he's committed.
Poor Joel.
Best sounding chalkboard. I don't know where you get your chalkboards.
Yeah, it's more of I would say dry erase.
Who even uses chalkboard?
So
anymore?
smooth.
Come on, bro.
Dry erase board.
Yeah.
Smooth erase board.
Okay, on to the mailbag, of course, which is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy, the one-stop shop for all of your training needs for your business aviation flight department. A great blog post they had, Max, on planning for LOAs. It's no surprise that getting LOAs is not a pleasant feat sometimes, especially with the delays that come in to play when trying to get them for a new airplane. Actually, for the MBA Small Flight Department Committee that I serve on, we're working on creating a resource with Christy DeYoung. Do you remember Christy DeYoung, Max? I think
I do.
The LOAs for you, right? Other former FAA inspector and some other people creating some educational content on how to get that going right now. But great piece on Advanced Aircrew Academy's blog, aircrewacademy.com. Thank you for your continued support. Joel, what's in the mailbag?
As I was listening to your interview with Roger in my car, I stopped for gas and 2 police officers walked out of the gas station. My heart sank. We're about to get caught. Then I realized I'm simply listening to a story. It was so well done that I could mentally imagine being there without any of the risks or moral questions. That is the element of a good story. Hearing Roger's tales actually reminded me of an old bold pilot I used to fly with. My friend worked for the government trying to take down smuggling operations, track aircraft, and even working as a smuggling pilot undercover. The Roger stories are equal to my friend's flying stories. They are 2 sides to the same coin. Similar to hearing stories from a German fighter pilot and an American fighter pilot in World War II. There are some good career options in this area that won't put a young pilot in jail. The FBI has a large aviation section, and Customs and Border Patrol actively recruiting air interdiction agents. They offer a unique flying experience without the prospect of going to jail. As far as morality is concerned, Roger's tale is a cautionary tale to anyone. Bad things don't happen overnight. It's a slow ladder of small things that eventually grow into a much larger situation. As you pointed out in the podcast, he could have walked away free and clear many times in a reverse course. We are all at risk for this behavior in our lives, including some of the respondents who took a morally superior tone. Ultimately, Roger paid the price for his crimes. We are not judge, nor jury, nor executioner. We are all watching from the sideline. An important life lesson is this: sometimes good people do bad things. Sometimes bad people do good things. At the end of the day, we each have to wake up in the morning and own the decisions we've made in our lives. As a couple of professional aviators and amateur podcasters, you guys knocked this one out of the park. Mark me down as a +1 for the Roger story. Keep up the good work. You're doing something right if you have a few haters. Cheers, Mike.
Well said, Mike.
That was a great email, Mike. Well written.
I want to hear the other side of the coin, taking down the smugglers back. Like I said, I think that the smuggling drugs via aircraft has gone way downhill. to almost non-existence. But I'd like to hear about
into
the old
U.S.
days.
at least. I would say the U.S.
Yeah, into the U.S. Yeah.
Hi, Dylan and Max. I value your show and the variety of guests. Got a question for both of you. If you knew it was your last flight as a pilot and were offered the chance to fly any plane just once, either a plane you've always wanted to fly or one you've flown before and wish you could fly it just one more time, what plane would you choose? Neither cost nor history are limitations. And after giving your individual answers, why that plane? All the best, Jack.
That's a tough one. That's actually not that tough.
Okay.
It would definitely be some sort of fighter jet for me because it's just I've never flown one and likely never will. Like a frontline, like 5th generation, like the F-22 probably, or F-35 or something like that.
Okay. Joel, do you have a good answer?
Oh, I always lived in awe of the Pilatus PC-12. I know, lame answer maybe, but...
my God, Joel.
Good news,
hey,
Joel.
I don't have the experience you guys have.
It's that one's attainable. I think we can make that happen. Some listeners.
Yeah, wow, Joel.
Next time you're in Central Ohio, will you give Joel a ride on PC-12?
Yeah, somebody make Joel's.
Big dreamer here. Big dreams.
Non-stop from Columbus to Cincinnati. It'll be great. You might have to throw.
I mean, an F-22 would be just fine.
Yeah. So, okay, my answer. You're going to ridicule Max. I don't think you're going to like it, but it would be.
If you say Challenger 604, I'm walking away.
The Challenger 650. It's the latest generation. It would be a dream. Dream on cross countries. No, I'm going to say the Martin Mariner, which is a big amphib from World War II. Just because my oldest son loves that airplane. He's obsessed with it. And I've always wanted to fly an amphib. So I think taking my son flying in a Martin Mariner, I think would be super cool. And there are no more of them flying in the world today. So it'd be a cool experience.
I was thinking about the Antonov 225.
Oh,
that would be good.
Would have been cool.
Yeah,
but
it'll be bad. The Grumman Albatross. I'm also like the.
Yeah,
that would have been cooler, Joel. Just so you know, just for the record.
Just so you know, but you've already locked it in, you loser. All right.
Well, the 225 would be awesome because there's a great documentary on YouTube of them like moving some big like piece of mining equipment, I think in South America, and the pilots, the crew of the 225 is exactly what you would picture as like this sort of like Eastern European / Russian crew, like in flight suits and cigarettes, and just like the whole thing would have been an amazing experience.
No.
Next.
Yeah, next. The air tractor is a good one. Just saying.
That's enough, Joel.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's move on. What about the 172, Joel? You want to fly one of those? You ever thought of a 152 potentially?
182.
What about a Piper Warrior, Joel? You ever seen one of those?
Hey guys, tonight is my last night sitting reserve in Phoenix, and I was posting about it on one of the aviation message boards I frequent. I got the attached reply, thought you'd get a kick out of it. The quote, "You should write the 21.5 guys and make them resend that awful advice they gave you about not upgrading. Cheers, Mike." A little bit of reference there. Mike commuted for 7 months to be captain before getting home base.
He wrote in to the show and said, what should he do? Should he wait? He lives in the base of the airline. He said, I can get a quicker captain upgrade if I commute for a few months, or should I just stay put and wait for home based upgrade? And we said, stay. Just take it.
We told him definitively, or we said, look, it depends on what's important to you.
Well, remember,
because didn't he have like a kid in the last year at home or something like that? Was that him?
It was like I think his son like it was maybe last year at high school. But the flip side was like his dad was a captain, and he wanted to be able to have his dad see him be a captain.
Right.
There was a myriad of things. Here's my thing though, Mike. You made a post on a message board celebrating that you weren't commuting anymore, which tells me that commuting sucked. So I'm just saying, it was the 7 months worth of commute. I don't know. You never know.
Yeah, Mike, that's the question. What was your take on the advice? Was it, are you glad you made that decision or not?
I asked him in the email.
Oh.
I said,
and did he respond?
He said it was worth it.
Oh,
but
good.
It wasn't too bad. But here's the caveat, because there was like some UPS flight. He could fly a confirmed flight in every time. So he didn't have to fly stand.
That sounds like fun.
So special thing. But anyways, good feedback. We appreciate it, Mike. Thank you. Last one. Go ahead, Joel.
Hi, Max and Dylan. On a recent episode, you had Dr. Christopher Broyhill on the show, sharing many valuable insights for navigating compensation in business aviation. Dr. Broyhill made a point regarding 401k and employer matches and direct contributions I'd like to correct. The employer match is not, in fact, limited to $22,500 or $30,000 for pilots over the age of 50. The $22,500 and $30,000 contribution amount he quoted are the IRS limits for the contributions from the pilot's pocket. Salary deferral. The pilot's contribution and employer match or direct contributions combined cannot exceed $66,000 in 2023. Wanted to clear this up in case there are any business aviation pilots out there thinking about negotiating increased retirement benefits. Keep crushing. Tim Pope.
Tim Pope, financial gatekeeper. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's very correct. And
Well,
you want to know the crazy part for those of you that are not airline pilots? Most of the time for captains, that gets exceeded every year. It's crazy. They're like trying to figure out different places to put all of this money. It's unreal.
Yeah, because you get money back basically, right? Because they hit their max and then.
Yeah, unless they can figure out another. That's what one of the things that we're trying to figure out in our contract is somewhere, because it's highly taxed, right? That overage. So
right.
Trying to figure out another way to somewhere else to
more
something else to do with that money. But
more dependents. That's the secret. Have a couple more kids.
Well, how's that going to help?
More dependents, more write-offs, right? I don't know.
Not your maximum contribution.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'll leave the advice to Tim.
Yeah. How about you just do that?
All right. Well, thanks for everyone for writing into the mailbag. info@215podcast.
Have more kids. That's your. Sorry. You've been coming up with these off the cuff advice lately that is just horrific.
What's the one I said last week? Grip it and fake it till you make it. Grip it.
Yeah, fake it to a kid that was he was really worried about upgrading to captain before he's ready, and you're like, well, just fake it till you. I was like, what?
You'll be fine.
I'm so glad you left it. That didn't get edited out, right?
No, we left it in.
Oh, good. I
Just
demanded
add 5
that.
knots to your approach.
Fake it till you make it. What? Yeah. All right. Well, just jump off a bridge, into a cold river. That sounds good.
Just respect the stick shaker. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Just put on a blindfold and cross the highway. Sounds good.
Full send.
Just get a revolver, put one bullet in, spin it, put it in your head, and pull the trigger. Oh, good advice, Dylan. I'm glad. Great advice. Any other real gems you have for us today?
Well, I'll save it for the flight advice segment, which is coming up later on.
Please do, because these young impressionable aviators really are looking forward to what the next little.
Listen, we can't all be mentoring everybody on the radio 24 hours a day, turning on runway lights and whatever else you're up to out there. Icing reports. All right, enough of this. It's time to get to the main event. Our conversation with Chad from Mission Aviation Fellowship. What is it that missionary pilots are up to out there? It's a great service for humanitarian aid around the world. Let's get right into that. Here we go. Well, Max, we're so excited to continue our series. What's it like to be a pilot doing interesting and unique jobs in aviation? We've got Chad Irwin joining us. He is Director of Operations for the Mission Aviation Fellowship. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Chad, I think most professional pilots have probably heard about missionary flying. And they know they have a picture maybe in their mind, oh yeah, they're flying small airplanes maybe in the jungle and dropping off supplies and doing that kind of stuff. But I don't think we really know a lot about how it actually works. So we'd love to learn a little bit more about what missionary aviation in general does, and then specifically what MAF does. So can you give our listeners just a little intro into your world?
Sure. Yeah, missionary aviation. I get to answer this question a lot. I worked in our mobilization recruitment department for a little bit when we first came back from serving overseas. So I got to travel and talk to college students, guys in flight programs, and explain a little bit about missionary aviation. And there's always some different ideas of what it looks like. If you run into expats while you're overseas, they assume you're there for all the money you must be earning because you're living, working overseas. So they think it's a company that's paying really well for you to live somewhere else. But the truth is, missionary pilots raise our own support to be able to go and do this work in remote places in the world that are super isolated, whether that's geographically, sometimes it's politically, you name it. There are people that are living in very isolated places that have usually no contact with the outside world, and the airplane is the tool that allows us to be able to have a relationship with those people, enter with supplies, fly in for medical relief, disaster relief, you name it. And so I think a lot of the misconceptions, I guess, sometimes are that you're out there maybe for 2 weeks. It's a mission trip if people have been involved in mission trips from their church, or it's something that an airline pilot does during their vacation, or maybe they take a sabbatical to go do. But to fly in the environments that we fly takes a lot of advanced training. All of our pilots have to speak another language. They have to understand what it means to fly in different contexts as far as civil aviation in that country. Obviously, we train them to operate in and out of very short airstrips, whether it's in the jungle or in the mountains or you name it. So there's a lot of training that goes into it as well. And ultimately, we're looking for pilots who feel that this is a call on their lives to go and serve people in this way and not just an exciting adventure to fly airplanes, although we get to do that too.
So how long does somebody, once they enter the program, can you kind of give us an idea of like how you get into this program, and then once you're there, what does the training look like? And, just kind of baby step us through it here.
Sure. There are a number of programs around the U.S. that in different colleges that have specific missionary aviation programs. Sometimes it's a part of another flight program, like Liberty in Virginia, for instance. They have a very large, professional flight program, and then they'll have a small part of that program that also has a missions emphasis. So for pilots that are interested in going into missions, and so they might emphasize, dead reckoning and pilotage. They might emphasize short field takeoffs and landings. They might have a pilot who served as a missionary in their department to help kind of mentor these pilots on what are the things that are important for them to know and to understand and answer those kinds of questions. And then in some of the programs, we have people on loan to work and as flight instructors to help, train the guys in those departments. Moody Bible Institute is the largest missionary aviation program. And about half of the missionary pilots around the world, that's kind of the norm we hear. About half the pilots come out of that program. That's the program that I went to years ago. And their program was started from the ground up only to train missionary pilots. And so the training is a little different in that typically a missionary pilot has both Bible and missions type training as well as the aviation and professional aviation courses. Another difference from a lot of aviation jobs is that typically we're looking for someone who's both a pilot and an A&P mechanic. Because of the remoteness of the places that we work and serve, especially in years past when we were flying less complicated aircraft, a pilot might be called upon to work on his own airplane, fly it, fly the schedule, manage the program, work on the airplane, do all of that. That's not quite the same today just because of the complexity of the airplanes that we're flying and everything. But anyhow, back to your question as far as a program. So those programs are anywhere from 2 to 5 years typically to do the training. So pretty much a typical college, experience where you're getting a bachelor's of science in aviation technology with a missions emphasis or whatever. After that, you come out of that training, typically to come to an organization like ours, and we do a technical evaluation to see if they're basically where they need to be technically. And also we have a candidate committee that meets with them to kind of try to figure out, are they a good fit for our organization and for the kind of work that we're going to do.
Interesting. So what kind of airplanes do you guys operate?
We've made a real shift in about the last 10 to 12 years where we were about 80% piston and 20% turbine maybe 15 years ago. Predominantly, when I joined, 185 and 206s. I've been with MEF for 23 years, so it's mostly 185s and 206s. Now we're mostly Kodiaks and Caravans, and we still have just a smattering of 206s that are around in places where we need those for the tiniest airstrips to be able to get in, and where we can still get avgas. That's one of the main reasons we've switched to turbine aircraft over the years, has just been the inavailability of avgas in the places that we fly. So we typically end up being the importer to get the fuel, and then you've got to transport it in drums, and it's just a major hassle, and you end up paying, even before the prices went up in the U.S., we were paying $15 to $20 a gallon in places like Africa or Indonesia for avgas.
Wow. All right. So I want to get back to some of the training and kind of the recruiting stuff for a minute. Somebody starts and you mentioned there's the Moody Bible Institute program that you guys have. Would you say the majority of your pilots are maybe coming out of college, younger, first career, or do you get a lot of people that are maybe switching later on in life? What does that look like?
I would say we get both. But the majority are people that have been in programs that have been pointed in this direction. Probably, they've been talking to a recruiter maybe since high school, or they're, or they've had some background and understanding of missions, either because someone came and shared at their church, or they saw a video on YouTube, or, there's lots of different stories. But I would say that a good percentage, probably in the 75% are people that are coming more directly out of college. And then we also have lots of folks coming out of the Air Force or some airlines. Sometimes it's a short airline career where they got into the airlines basically to pay off college debt, and then this has been their plan. And so maybe they've got 5 or 6 years under the belt on a 121 or 135, and now they're coming back into missions once they've gotten their debts paid off and stuff like that.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's a lot of boxes that you got to check. Foreign language, ATP, or I'm sorry, A&P, along with usually a calling to go into missions, and probably a desire to, I'm going to guess, not make the equivalent to the United Airlines pay scale as well. So I'm just picturing, like, in this day and age of a pilot shortage right now, where there's so much competition for talent, is it more difficult to recruit, or are the people that are called to do this, is that kind of stayed the same? People are kind of staying on their mission. What do you see out there?
I think it's stayed the same. I think for us, it is a specific type of flying. And so the people that we're recruiting, I think, like I said, they're looking at this as a calling on their life. And so they're thinking, this is the kind of flying that I want to do, that is serving people, that's serving the church. It's helping, people that are very isolated, that don't have the basic needs of life that we enjoy. And so it's a very fulfilling career. And we do look for people that are looking at this as a career. I mean, it is, I think generationally, sometimes it's hard for us recruiting because, we're in an age now where we have that, whole FOMO type thing, the fear of missing out. So somebody comes like, I'd like to do that, but I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to do something else. And so, I would say, for the most part, people coming in, it's probably about the same. I do sometimes worry, like, well, it's a lot easier to say, I don't like this. I think I'll go to the airlines now, because there are so many jobs where maybe in the past that wasn't as easy a transition to make. And now, if you've been flying overseas, know another language, you had to make command decisions, life or death stuff. Our folks do pretty well in airline interviews when they do decide after.
Tell me about a time.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I've had to make some really tough decisions.
When was the last time a spear was thrown at your tire? Wow. So let's talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of learning how to fly in these challenging environments, because, that's, in my mind, when I think of the missionary, and I think most people would think of, wow, we're flying some type of not high performance, some sort of short takeoff and landing airplane into a challenging airstrip. How do you prepare people to do that? Is it a lot of like on the job type stuff? Do you have some type of campus you train at? What does that look like?
Yeah, they start out after they join MAF. So they go through that TE process, that technical evaluation process that I told you about. They come in, they go through that process. Then they have to go through a whole onboarding process to like join the organization. So our department says, yes, they're technically qualified. And then another department basically says they're qualified to be missionaries and not just pilots. And then once they come back to us for the actual training, which comes after they've gone out and raised support to support themselves overseas. And so we help them do that. We help them figure out how to raise support and tell people about what they're doing and talk to churches and all of that stuff. They come back to our department in Nampa, Idaho, where we do all of the training before we send them overseas. So the basic indoc course in Nampa is what we oversee. And we basically take them from commercial pilot, instrument rated. And then we start out in the 206, and we work with them to completely understand the 206 and to get every ounce of performance out of it. And we take them here in the valley around Boise. We have a number of airstrips that we have worked with landowners to either use their airstrips, or there are even a couple places where we built airstrips to more closely replicate the types of airstrips that we use overseas. And so we kind of slowly go through a course of training them to how to fight illusions while you're landing on a 15% upsloped runway, how to calculate an abort point on a wet, slippery airstrip that's 450 meters long in a 206, how to set abort points for takeoff. These are single engine, but we we have what we call accelerate and stop abort points as well, so that we can evaluate the takeoff performance and say, hey, this isn't going well. I need to abort here before I have any issues. And so there's lots of technical stuff that we're just kind of, filling them with. It's kind of a fire hose in the beginning. And then we slowly take them through a stair-step process from going that, that's the stair steps of learning, right? From a rote to understanding, application, correlation. We just keep kind of ratcheting that up and taking them to more and more challenging places into the backcountry in Idaho. Again, airstrips that really closely mirror what they're going to see when they're overseas, and using those same foundational skills that we've taught them, we take them to those more and more complex places, and we have them solve those problems. So we take them to a place they've never seen before. How do you evaluate this airstrip? How would you set up to land here? And then we evaluate how they've determined that. On the field, there's a chief pilot that is going to determine the right approach path and everything, and how they're going to fly an approach into this airstrip. But we want them to have that understanding so that they can evaluate on their own how you would maneuver the airplane and maximize the space that you have to be able to set the airplane up for an approach. So a lot of it is just some real basic rules of thumb that we teach them, as far as glide path angle. How do you figure out a glide path angle to an airstrip that's 15% upslope in the touchdown zone, and then even more than that, maybe up at the top of the airstrip. So there are tons of illusions when you're flying into an airstrip like that. And you can watch the backcountry, videos on YouTube and see people doing that in Kit Foxes or in Carbon Cubs. But if you're doing it in a Caravan or a Kodiak, there's a lot more mass there and a lot more at stake with passengers on board. You're not just out on your own in the little airplane flying around at 35 knots. You have to be on your game to be able to do that. So that's what we do here in Nampa. And then once they get overseas onto the program, they spend typically about 50 hours in the right seat of a Caravan or a Kodiak, doing everything except fly the airplane. And that's for them to get accustomed to what it means to navigate into these different places, through weather, various instrument or non-instrument systems, depending on the country that they're working in, how to deal with passengers on the ground, how to do loading, weight and balance on the field, how to deal with all of the requests that come, because you land in a community with a certain job to do, and then you're flooded with requests. Can you take out my baby? It's sick. Can you, my son's at school. Can you take this cargo out to him because he doesn't have any food? There's just all these things that are just constantly coming at the pilot. And so they're learning all of that stuff, sitting in the right seat, learning how to operate the radio, how to, use the flight management system, all of that stuff. So then they come back here to Nampa, and then we do the transition course to take them into whatever aircraft they're going to be flying, whether it's Caravan or Kodiak. And then we train them here in the left seat, and we have both a dedicated Caravan and Kodiak flight simulator. And so we can set them down in there. We can go through flows for emergencies and memory items, and then move them into the actual aircraft here in the training department. And then they go back to their program, and then they get into the left seat with an instructor pilot, and they work for the next 50 hours in the left seat with an instructor flying with them. And then slowly they're allowed to go solo into some of the easier strips first, obviously. And then you kind of keep ratcheting up into the more challenging airstrips that program happens to serve.
Wow. And then do you train them on the maintenance aspect too, since they're A&Ps and they're... Yeah,
exactly. So we do have some guys that are not pilot mechanics. So we like them to be pilots something else, because the kind of work that we do, there's always work to be done. And we can't have a pilot that thinks, well, if I'm not flying today, I don't need to go into the office, or there's nothing for me to do. I'm not going to, pitch in and help. We want somebody that...
Yeah, we call that an airline pilot.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's what we call airline.
Oh, the dispatcher has
we call it an airline pilot. Yeah.
I'm going to go home. It doesn't work that way. You need people that are engaged in the ministry, not just in the flying aspect. And so you want people that have some other skill to bring. So we have guys that are pilot finance or pilot IT. They might be, have had an IT background, and man, that's something that we can always use, because they're just always IT things that need to be done, because we have communications issues. We have servers there, internet stuff that we have to do. And sometimes that's all on our own. It's not like here in the US, we might have to have it set up in the past through a satellite system, to be able to have internet in remote places, those kinds of things. So you need somebody that understands that and can do it. So But yeah, as far back to your question, the maintenance thing, we do the same thing. And so they come through here, they're evaluated as a mechanic as well, and then they're trained on the aircraft that they're going to be working on. Our pilot mechanics tend to be more now of a pilot, kind of a maintenance assistant, because they are flying pretty much every day. When maintenance is being done, or they're there to help, usually alongside our maintenance specialists. So we also recruit full-time maintenance specialists who run the shop, the maintenance program on our different bases, and so they're the ones that are doing hot sections or hanging a prop or an engine. And the pilot mechanics would be more there on a rotational basis to help with the projects that are going on, but they're not usually managing maintenance or filling out logbooks anymore. In the past, that would have been true, but now it's more you're there to be an extra set of hands and understand how to help open up an aircraft for an inspection and help with the inspection and stuff, and just be another part of the team.
I guess I had always imagined that one of the reasons for the A&P background was that if you break down at an outstation, like it's just you. Like,
yeah.
So, I have pictures in my head of somebody, trying to jack up a Kodiak and change a flat tire or something on a muddy strip. I mean, does that stuff really happen so much or not really?
It doesn't really happen as much now, no, because you're not going to have, an extra G1000 panel because something goes out, or if your tire goes flat on a Kodiak. It's not like a 185 and you can get the whole community to come behind with some posts and stuff and jack it up by the wing and then change the tire. That's just not going to happen. But what is really nice is if you have a pilot who understands the systems enough to be able on the radio to say, or we have satellite link as well, so we can just send a text message out over our tracking system and say, this has happened, I need this part, or this is what you need to be prepared to do as far as tool wise. And so if you have a pilot mechanic, they can kind of evaluate and troubleshoot what's going on, versus a pilot that said, I'm not saying pilots don't understand their systems, but it sure helps if you have somebody that has an in-depth understanding of the aircraft they're flying to give a lot more information. So we do fly the technician and the right tools out there to get it fixed out on the field. In the past, though, that was more of the case, and kind of the idea you could just some baling twine and duct tape and get it back together and fly home. But obviously, that's not the case with the PT6 and a G1000 or whatever in your airplane.
And do you guys maintain you have to spare part stocks? And what if you have an engine that comes up that needs a hot section? Do you pull it and send it back and then put a spare on, or how does all that work?
Yeah, we have a really close relationship with several different companies. Covington Engines is one that has been a real partner of ours for years, and so we'll have a loaner engine or a loaner section that we can ship out, and we have a department basically that's tracking all of the consumables and the life cycle stuff, so that when an inspection's coming up, it's not a surprise. We have the parts in place and shipped out there and everything. So they have both a local stock for the normal stuff that you're going through, but then we have to have actually obviously some planning to get stuff in place for those kinds of things that come up.
How many airplanes and pilots do you guys have right now?
Good question. We operate as MAF US, but we operate also with some sister organizations. MAF International is the other larger one coming out of Europe. And I think it's around 60 aircraft, 23 countries between the two. I don't know the total number. I think MAF US staff, we have maybe close to 200 family units. So it could be a single, it could be a family, but 200 units overseas.
Okay. Wow. So that kind of brings me to my next question there. Do you sort of do it like domicile, where there's it seems like you kind of have some focus areas on your website? You talk about the DRC, Haiti, some other countries. So am I imagining kind of these bases where you have multiple aircraft mechanics, pilots sort of there, and then there's different routes? Or talk a little bit about how that all works. Or was it more somebody in the middle of nowhere and they're on their own? What's it all look like?
No, now, again, based on the types of airplanes that we fly, we typically have a larger base, and it usually is in a city. Sometimes it's the capital city, because that's where you're going to have access to supplies, hospitals, the things that people need to get to or get from. And so we'll typically have a main base in a place like that. So, but then we might have some remote bases that might have just a few airplanes and 4 or 5 families. Those remote bases might do real basic maintenance, and then they would take the airplane out to the main base then for any major maintenance that needs to be done. But Yeah, so the main base in the capital, I'm just thinking like Indonesia is one of our largest programs. Sentani is our kind of our main base, and I'm just throwing numbers out there. I don't really know for sure, but you might have 15 or 16 families there, and a mix of pilots, mechanics, IT people, accountants. You have program managers. You have all the other staff that you need to run a program like that. The post holders for the aviation operations side of everything. And then you have a remote base that has, like I said, 4 or 5 families, and they kind of rotate back and forth. And so families might be in one area for a while, and then as their kids get older, they might go to a larger base where there's a high school maybe available for them. It might be an international school, or it might be a mission school. So that's one of the things we have to take into account is our families. And then the reason we're in different countries, really we exist as a service organization. And so we go where there is a need. And so where there are other organizations, mission organizations, sometimes they're health organizations that need our kind of service, then we go there to be able to serve them. And so we're not in a country that has, a really good rail and road system, because it just makes no sense for us to be there. But if you're in a place that doesn't have that, like you said, Congo, Indonesia, then that's where the airplane is the tool that needs to be there.
Right.
This might sound, at the risk of sounding like a dumb question, does anybody ever pay for your guys' service? Is it always just from what you guys raise?
No, that's a great question, because I think some people think, oh, this is a ministry, and so all the flying is free. It would be almost impossible for us to raise all the funds.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, to fly a caravan for free. And human nature is you take advantage of that too. If it was free, it would be cheap, right? And so we have subsidized costs for the different users. And so if you've got, a national church that has very little funds, we still charge them what we think is something that they can afford and gives value to the airplane, so that they understand the sacrifice that our supporters and our organization, everybody's making to be able to have that asset there. So they'll pay a really low fare basically per seat or per flight hour. And then for expat missionaries, you might have a little higher rate. And then if you have government entities that you fly for, or other NGOs that are commercial type, they might be doing clean water projects, and they might be doing wonderful work, but then we'll have maybe a different rate for them per hour. So each country is slightly different, just depending on the kind of the emphasis, the ministry that we do. We have a program, for instance, in Lesotho, which is a country right in the middle of South Africa. It's up in the mountains. And basically 90% of their flying is for a program that the government has called the Flying Doctor Service. And we fly their doctors, nurses, all the patients in and out. And that's almost all that we do in that country. But it's a real need, because there's almost no general aviation there. And it's the entire country is mountainous. And I think the lowest elevation in the whole country is like 5,000 feet above sea level. So that's a place, it's different. And so we have a contract with the government there to fly for them for whatever rate it is.
Max, let's take a quick break from our fascinating discussion with Chad to remind folks tax time is on the horizon, which is a great time to think about your finances and getting your house in order. Why don't you set up a free call with our friend and certified financial planner, Tim Pope? He's helping professional pilots nationwide create and execute a smart financial strategy. Timothy P. Pope, your financial planning partner for all phases of your financial flight. Why don't you check the show notes for your link to book your free appointment with Tim? Okay, back to more from Chad. Let's look at a little bit and I know this question is very tough to answer, because I understand aviation, it's very dynamic, but let's do a quote unquote day in the life of
I was
a pilot.
That's the same thing.
And recognizing, I'm sure there's many things that change all the time, but one thing you said that was cool that I don't think I ever really thought about was use the word family a lot. So it's not like if you've got if you're married, you've got a family, they're probably with you in the domicile. Is that pretty typical?
Yeah, I mean, it would be abnormal for your family not to be with you. The only time when your family wouldn't be with you is if we were in we have levels of security levels. And so if a program or a country is going through a security crisis, we might have a level where the spouse and dependents are evacuated, and the pilots might rotate through and still fly. They might even live at the airport just because of the situation being, such that they can't be at their homes or in the community where they normally would live. But that would be
abnormal.
Abnormal, yeah.
Okay.
So typically we're places where we can have family units living together. So the pilots, the neat thing about this kind of job is that 95% of the time you fly, you get up in the morning, you go fly, you come back, and you're at home every night. And so that was a great benefit for our family that our house was right across the road from the hangar. And so I could walk home if I came home around lunchtime and I knew the kids would be home from school. I could walk over there, have lunch, go back, have a couple afternoon flights, and then be back for dinner. And so having the families there together then allows us to have families. Not only we don't just have pilots flying airplanes, we have families that are getting engaged with the local community. They're engaged with the local church, and it becomes home to them. Our kids spent the first 15 years of our son's life, and our daughter's a few years younger, so first 12 years of her life in Ecuador. And that's still to them, even though we've been back here for 5 or 6 years and this is home now, that's still what they consider home because that's where they grew up.
Right. Okay. So back to my original question, day in the life, walk us through an average day for an average quote unquote, average MAF pilot.
Sure. So for me in Ecuador, for instance, I would get over to the hangar somewhere around 7:00 in the morning. That's when the radio schedule, the radio reports came in from the different communities. So there would be anything from, emergencies or flight requests, kind of getting an idea what the needs were for that day. And then working with our flight coordinator, he would have already had a schedule worked up for the day. But then obviously it'll be modified based on what comes in on the radio that morning because there could be life or death things that are going on or emergency calls. So then you get your flight schedule for the day, you go out, do your pre-flight, just like, any pilot. And we typically have loaders and fuelers that national employees that are helping with some of those aspects to help get the airplane ready for us, especially on the outloads, so that you're going to be breaking your back all day, loading and unloading, a Kodiak or a Caravan. That's a lot of work. And so we've got folks on the ground helping to get the aircraft loaded and you depart out. A lot of our places we're flying, 45 minutes to an hour would be a normal leg out to the communities. You might fly in with a load of building material or roofing or something like that. You land, obviously you got to offload all of that. Typically there's someone in the community, there are people there to help offload that. And then there might be passengers there or in a community nearby. So now you have to put the seats in the airplane that you had stashed down in the pod. So you got to put the seats back in, fly over to your next spot, pick up a load of passengers and maybe take them back to your home base. Once you get back to your home base, your next flight's probably already sitting there with all the cargo on carts ready to go into the airplane. So you get out, maybe take a break, stretch your legs, and start fueling the airplane. The loaders are loading the next load, and you're going in to the next place, which might be Bible school students that are going out to a community to put on some kind of vacation Bible school or some other outreach or emphasis, some church function that's going out in the community. And you take those passengers out, same thing, and you pop over to another community to pick up another load or a patient, for instance, somebody that needs to get out to the hospital. And a lot of those things are combined because they're not always, emergencies, meaning we need you to come right now. This person's dying. Sometimes it's, hey, this person has a checkup for a surgery they had a month ago, and so they need to come out. And so you're just working with the local Ministry of Health or a hospital to be able to coordinate that with your flight schedule for the day. So you might do 2 of those flights, something like that in the morning. And then in the afternoon, one more flight. Just depends on the country you're in, how many flights you have to do that day, what the weather is. We have programs, for instance, in Indonesia, in the mountainous area. They start their flights at like 6. They have to pre-flight at 5 o'clock in the morning, and they're taking off by 6 because a lot of the airstrips, they'll be they can't get into them after maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon because of wind. So they have to hit it pretty hard in the morning, but then they're usually back on the ground by 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Interesting. So typically you're looking at 6, 8, 10 legs in a day would be.
Yeah. I mean, a normal day for me in Ecuador was probably 8 to 12 landings a day. and a busy day. If we were doing like camp flying, there might be like a Christian camp that's going on, so we're shuttling all the kids that are going to camp. Those days you might have 18 to 20 landings on a day like that.
So landing currency, not a problem.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
Our
night
average- night currency we didn't have. No, we didn't fly at night. Not a lot of lights in the jungle, but
Right.
our average leg, if you took all the time that we flew monthly, our average leg was about 15 minutes. But typically you had at the end of a term, you would have 2 to 3 times the number of landings than the hours that you flew. So,
Wow.
So I think, it's funny because coming from my world where there's more structure, you would think about complacency, safety management, kind of checklists. How do you maintain some professionalism when you're doing the same thing all the time with the same legs? It's all visual, maybe you're not even talking on the radio. Is that a struggle that you guys have? What's that look like?
It's actually not a struggle at all, because unlike, that's another probably misconception, is that you're a bush pilot and you're out there basically just hauling this thing around almost like a crop duster, and you're just in and out and in and out and back. No, I mean, we have checklists, we have memory items for emergencies, we have a dispatcher that's giving us our schedule and a load sheet for the flight. We speak on the radio. It might be in English, it might be in another language. The last 5 years I was in Ecuador, we had radar coverage even out over the jungle. So I had to talk to ATC on every leg. We had instrument approaches back into our home base. And so the place we lived got about 20 feet of rain a year. So we're on the edge of the Amazon rainforest. So we're fighting weather every day. So we're instrument, visual, trying to make that transition from instrument to visual without an approach. So you're looking for a place that you can descend down and get underneath. You can only do that safely with experience, and then also good reports from the different stations and stuff, knowing what the conditions are out there. Without those reports, there'd be no reason to go out there if you're just going to go out and turn around and come back. So we rely on the radio, HF radio, to give us reports about what the conditions are at the different stations, so that we can get out there and take a look and see if we can find a way down. But we have, en route instrument structures. There are countries where we have to invent that on our own. Where that's not, especially in the past. But now because of ICAO, even the countries that we're flying in that in 10, 15, 20 years ago had very limited, general aviation or civil aviation structure. They had somebody you had to go to get your pilot's license from, but there wasn't as much engagement or involvement. Now these are countries that are ICAO signatories. They've got, regulators are coming, to check on us to make sure we're following their rules, that we're flying according to the regulations. And so it is not what it was 20 years ago where people, you might have that idea that it was you're out there on your own. There are also other operators that are flying in some of these places. And so if there's money to be made, we're typically not taking the flights that might be tourism, for instance, or different organizations or companies that maybe we're not in complete agreement with. And so we prefer not to do that kind of flying. And so there are other companies that are going to capitalize on that kind of business and fly into some of these places as well. Sometimes those companies don't do it as safely as we do. And so depending on the culture, the aviation culture in that country, there can be very different levels of safety. If you ask them what an SMS is, they have no idea what a safety management system is. And we have a safety management system.
That was my next question. I mean, really interesting.
Yeah. So we have an entire safety and quality department. We have our manuals are in a 135 structure. We do operate as a 135 operator in certain countries where it's required. Most traditionally we've operated Part 91, but we've been able to usually charge for our services with an agreement with the government, because we kind of fit in this in between. We're not doing it for profit, but we're also not a commercial company, so we're not looking to make a profit. And so sometimes that makes us not fit in a 135. We don't truly fit in just a pure 91. And so there have been countries that have developed a Part 91 with a subpart that allows for community development or flight for the common good. And we're able to charge, those subsidized rates in those countries to be able to maintain the service and help cover some of those costs.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I was actually thinking the opposite. I'm like, God, these guys have to have a lot of structure and systems and things because of the risk of the environment and the amount of reps that you guys are doing every day.
Yeah.
That might be with one airplane what we discussed, times 60 or however many it is.
Yeah.
What about insurance?
Yeah, that's a good
Do
question.
you guys self-insure? Like, how do you get insurance for this?
One, we have a really good safety record because we do spend so much time training the pilots to do this work. I mean, it obviously has risk, but we work really hard to minimize that risk with the training we do, with the safety management system, with good procedures that we are constantly doing. We have our 6-month checks and line checks and proficiency checks. We do all of those things. So we have instructor pilots and chief pilots on each program to make sure that all of our pilots are flying to our standard and using the MAF way of flying. And that's one good thing about getting guys right out of a flight school, right? Rather than getting somebody from a career and they come in and think, oh, I like this way better, or this is another good way to do it. We want to do things the MAF way because we often say that, our manuals are kind of written in blood because we've had accidents in the past because we've learned from those accidents and we don't want people to have to recreate them. Insurance, though, we have a carrier, but we're also self-insured through an organization of other missionary aviation organizations where we all basically have whole coverage through that kind of co-op.
Yeah, it's kind of spread the risk along.
Yep.
Please tell me one of your flight department manuals is a 10 commandments of safety or something. You must have something like that, right?
No, I don't think so. Again, these are like ICAO or FAA structured manuals. So it's the normal 135 type manual.
God, it sounds like. So you've been doing this for 25 years, right?
Well, yeah, this will be 24 years this year.
God, it's got to have been so different 20 years ago, like you said. Now with Garmin and terrain displays and like all
iPads. Yeah.
Versus like you're out there with a 6-pack and no GPS, just hammering away. Like it's got to be leaps and bounds.
When I first got to Ecuador, I had a Garmin 100. That was the first GPSs that we had in the airplanes, and so I had a Garmin 100, which was just basically a CDI on some dots and a distance to your destination. And you could be anywhere in a circle from that destination based on that display. You just knew, hey, it's 45 miles out ahead of me, and I keep this thing centered. But even that allowed us to save, I think they said 10 or 15% on fuel costs because before we'd have to fly basically to a known checkpoint, which usually might be a river or a fork in the river or some kind of landmark, and then to make sure we hit on the right side and then move down river to find the community. So very dead reckoning and pilotage dependent back in those days, and we still emphasize that today. If you come for a technical evaluation, you will fly with a chart and a plotter and an E6B because we want to make sure that you understand what ForeFlight or whatever, typically ForeFlight, what your EFB is doing for you, the navigation stuff that you're using, because you're in places in the world where coverage might be spotty, you might have issues, whatever, and we want to know that those basic fundamental airmanship things are there, and we want to make sure that we have pilots that are well grounded in that. That being said, you're going to fly with a G1000 and big rectangular magenta boxes on the synthetic display that you're flying through most of the 99.9% of the time. But yeah, that's a big change. And for us, we flew instrument routes up to the capital in Ecuador in Quito, where you're between two mountain peaks, two volcanoes, 17, 18,000 foot volcanoes, and the MEA is 15,000 feet. You're flying right down through the middle of them. And big difference between having a synthetic vision display and showing, boy, I'm right in the middle. This feels really good, to a set CDI centered on your VOR and being like, okay, I hope the power doesn't go out to that VOR, shortly.
We dialed that radio in, right?
Yeah, exactly. Got the frequency right. Yeah. Check it twice.
Heads fall, tails rise.
Do you guys ever develop instrument approaches like on your own to like you're saying, where you have to get below a cloud layer, like just to get you down low enough to see?
Typically, no, because there's so many variables to do that, including verifying that your those waypoints that you might use, that they're correct and that someone hasn't changed them, or somebody didn't get in there and accidentally mess something up. But We do have kind of like let down procedures for certain sectors where we'll establish an MEA in Class G airspace. You're outside of a controlled area, and you can descend down to a minimum altitude. So we'll use a combination of kind of the space shuttle topography imagery plus some computer software that we can figure out what the highest points are in that sector. Then we'll go out and fly to where we think that point is, making sure that those things all agree. And then we'll come up with the right spacing, altitude limits so that we could have a pilot at least be able to come down maybe to 2,000 feet, and see if they can find a spot where there aren't any clouds and they can get down.
Right. That makes sense. So, okay. So we're deployed. We're doing these daily missions. Imagine this is 6 days a week. Do you do it? Will you fly every day? Do you have an off day normally?
Yeah. Typically we fly, we have duty hour requirements, restrictions, just like, anything in industry. So typically you're flying 5 days on, 2 days off. You'll have a rotation schedule usually to cover the weekends. A lot of times Sundays are emergency onlys. Obviously we're a Christian organization, so we typically are only flying for emergency stuff on Sundays. But yeah, kind of a normal schedule.
9 to 5, home every night.
Yeah, pretty much.
What else could you want?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, how long is, like, if let's say you're going to Ecuador, is that like 9 months, and then maybe come back to the States for a few months? I know there's some fundraising and other things you do. What does that all look like?
Yeah, our traditional model has been a 4-year cycle. So you're overseas for 3.5 years, and then you're back for 6 months. That doesn't mean you can't come back for vacation, your own time, but you don't have a set aside time from work where you're going to come back. So that 6 months when you would come back for furlough, we call it, you'd spend, a third of that time in some vacation maybe and seeing family, a third of that time raising support, and then a third would be furthering education. So it might be aviation related. It might be something else that you're interested in. But so there's time for you to kind of re-energize and get ready for the next term of service.
Max, we found this is the first and only flying job I've heard where furlough sounds like a good thing.
Yeah.
Usually that's like the bad news.
Although typically furlough, by the time, that 6 months is up, you're ready to go back because home is, your house is there, your things are there.
That's been there for 3.5
friends
years.
are. And you're ready to get back there. So.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit, Chad, I want to ask, probably you've mentioned YouTube and some other things. Bush flying has really been hot the last few years. A lot of pilots getting interested, stole drag, all this kind of stuff that sort of you guys are kind of in there. Plus, I'm seeing missionary pilots have big followings on YouTube. Yeah. Is this a good thing for you guys? Does it not really matter? Is it, or talk to us a little bit about that, because what you're doing is so cool, and I think people like to see it, and I love watching the videos. So how's that affected you guys?
I think that, it's a good thing in that it gets people excited about the kind of aircraft and taking aircraft into these types of places. So I think if you've got someone who's grown up maybe in the church and they're interested in airplanes and aviation, and they see those videos because there's just more of them out there and there's an increased following, that might get them, kind of on that path where you stumble across an MEF video and think, oh, well, you can kind of do that kind of thing where it's actually helping someone, and it's not just me and my 7 buddies who all have our own airplanes and we travel around in trail, making a bunch of noise into all these different places.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
No, I don't either.
Go on.
No, and they're cool videos. I watch them, and they're some of the same places that we fly into. But it's, again, it kind of goes back to that idea of doing this kind of work and this kind of flying for something greater than yourself. And that, I think, appeals to people when they see our videos and realize, yeah, you can fly into a 15% upslope airstrip that's, 400 meters long. But that's because there are people there who don't have a doctor. They have no access to get out for education, or no way to get a medical team in there, or the church missionaries into those areas. That's exciting for people, the kind of people that come into our organization. They can have that passion for aviation, and it combines really well with the other things that they think are important in life.
Yeah, it's well said. And so MAF does actually produce some of their own content, right? Of flying.
Yep. We have a department that goes and visits the programs. They do videos, both promotional kind of recruiting type videos, as well as videos for fundraising, to just get the word out about the kind of work we're doing, because our missionaries each of us raise our own personal support to be able to do the work that we're doing. And that covers just our family expenses to be overseas. But then MAF as an organization also we have a development department. They're raising the funds to buy airplanes and build hangars and all of the infrastructure that we need, because as individuals, we can't raise that kind of money. And so we have to have a professional side of the organization that's working to do that. And so they're working with churches and with foundations and writing grant proposals for, community development and health work that we're involved in to help raise funds for those kinds of things as well.
So I have kind of a different question. I imagine there are countries that need your service that maybe are not very welcoming to the Christian faith. Do you do clandestine operations? Can you even talk about this? But like, there's need out there in countries that might not be welcoming for that. Are you able to serve there? What does that look like?
I would say that there are countries in the world that, exactly what you said. There are countries that would be very opposed to having a missionary organization work there. But there are also countries that are very interested in having their aviation infrastructure built up, or they have needs for people to be able to their own people to be helped in very remote places. And so sometimes there are the possibilities of going into those countries to serve in a humanitarian aid way. We don't have to hide that it's a Christian organization, but we're very open about what we do, and we do that. And so if we have an agreement with the government, for instance, in Lesotho, we're going to do the flying doctor service. We do that, and we do it very well and very professionally.
All right, Chad, I have a confession to make to you. I have one check ride failure, and it was because of dead reckoning and diversion. I got lost. So I don't know. Really? I don't know that I would make it as an MAF pilot. Just listening to this, it might not be for me.
Encouraging.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I know.
I don't know if you would have passed with the technical evaluation, as they say. You may have
exactly. Yeah,
it's hard to say. Maybe even proved since then. Dead reckoning.
Probably not. Not in dead reckoning. I don't think. Anyways. All right. Let's get to the best part of the story.
Yeah, the part we've all been waiting for.
Story time. I want a few different stories from you. One, I want to hear about crazy, interesting, challenging things that you've done. And then also, I want to hear about some rewarding stories, maybe, that really make the sacrifice that you and your family have made, or maybe another pilot that you know, worth it. So hit us with as many good stories as you got, Chad.
Yeah, there's so many that came to mind when you first emailed me and said, hey, this is something we probably would want to talk about. It kind of flood your mind, and it's amazing some of the ones that you forget about, because it does become, the norm every day. If you take someone along with you on a flight, they're just blown away, and then you realize, oh yeah, this is not normal. It's not normal that you're picking up a snake bite victim and taking them to the hospital. It's, there's the kinds of airships that we fly into and everything that becomes the normal for us every day. And so sometimes they all kind of do blend together. There are always those ones that stick out to you for good and bad. I have ones that stick out to me because, I've had people die in my airplane, and those are the ones you think about. If we had gotten there earlier, or the day they called, the weather was terrible, we had to go the next day, and by the time we got them out, it was almost too late. And those are the kind of things that you wish you were God and that you could control those things. But ultimately, we work with our pilots to let them know, look, you maintain safety, you fly according to the rules that we've set in place, and you do leave the rest of that to God, because you're not going to be able to save everyone, and there are going to be people that are not going to make it. And so those are hard things to think about. But there's all the fun and crazy ones as well. And one that I remember real clearly is I got called up. I'd gotten back at the end of the day, thought it was my last flight. And we had a doctor that worked in our hangar, because we had a contract with the Ministry of Health to do all of the medical flying in the province where we served in Ecuador. And so she was on our radio every day, and she was really part of our team. She worked for the government, but she just had worked there for a number of years. And so she was just one of the group. And so she came up and said, hey, there's one of their doctors in a community was sick. So could I go pick up one of their doctors? And I'm like, sure, no problem. It's about a 25 minute flight, so pretty close. And as I was getting ready, she said, hey, would you mind taking another doctor that was there as an intern. She was doing they require their doctors to do like a year of rural internship. And so she was just there kind of as an intern for like 6 months, I think, in the hangar. So I said, sure. Plane's empty. She can ride along and we'll get out there. So we get out to the community. It's in an area kind of to the northeast of us with a tribal group called the Warani. And when we land, the doctor's standing there and he's got the flu or something. He's just not feeling well and wants to come out. He was working there for his rural year out in a community in the village. And as I'm standing there getting him ready to go, somebody else comes up and said that they had a gal that had, she was having some childbirth problems. And we flew, expectant moms out all the time because there were constantly issues, with childbirth. And so they asked if I would have room. And I said, sure, not a problem. Coming down the little trail there from the community to the airstrip. And I'm kind of getting the cabin. This was in a 206. So I'm getting the cabin kind of rearranged to figure out, okay, does she need to lay down? Can she sit up? What's that going to look like? And I look and I see her kind of go down to one knee as she's walking. I'm like, okay, I think she just had a contraction. She's, you tell she's in some pain there, but she's walking, and so she gets to the plane and I ask, would you prefer to sit down or lay down? And she said, I'd rather sit and with my legs out. So I pulled one row of seats out so she could kind of sit. The back row in a 206, you're almost sitting on the floor already. So just have her feet kind of straight out. She'd be comfortable. The doctor's back there with her. But as I'm getting the seats reconfigured, she starts having another contraction. And so I said, you can probably tell where this is going. I said, hey, I'm not a doctor, to the doctor. But those contractions are pretty close together. I have a couple kids, I've been in the hospital and my wife was having our kids, and no, it's a 20-minute flight. We'll be fine. Not an issue. So we get her on board and take off. I'm up front. The doctor's obviously in the back with her. And I think the doctor with the flu was sitting up by me in the co-pilot seat. So I'm trying not to get the flu as we're flying back. And next thing I know, I feel that the tail of the 206 start to move around. And so I look back, and sure enough, that 20 minutes was not going to be enough for this gal who was having problems giving birth. And so the indigenous women, most of those communities, they give birth usually squatting and hanging on to something rather than laying down. So I look back, she's hanging on from the seatbelt attach point up in the ceiling, squatted, and there's the doctor. And I'm just like, well, I said, do you want me to turn around? She's like, no, keep going. And so I figured the only job I could do was keep flying the airplane. There was really nothing I could do at that point. But it wasn't long after that, I could hear the baby crying. And I would say, regrettably, my mind went to what kind of mess am I going to have to clean up when we get on the ground? Because, you do not want bodily fluids in between aluminum skin laps on the floor of your 206. And so, man, you're going to have to like hose it down and everything. But miraculously, we landed and there was like one tiny drop of blood at one spot that we had to clean up. But the doctor had done an amazing job. I have no idea how she did it. And there was that baby in that lady's arms. And so we landed and got some pictures with her and everything. And she said she was going to name the baby after me, which was funny because Chad is not the short A in Chad is not a sound that they can make in their language nor in Spanish. So my name is always butchered in Latin America. And so I was like, oh, please don't do that to your baby. Give them a normal name. I appreciate the sentiment and everything. But
how about Cessna?
So I have no idea if there's a little Chad running around in the jungle now or not. I didn't hear how that went as far as the birth certificate, but that was a pretty neat experience. That was the only time I had a baby born in a flight. So a lot of close cases, but that one was glad.
Now, did you update your flight plan en route with souls on board? Did you add another one?
I did. I actually called the flight. I called the flight scheduler, and they were kind of like, "What?" Because they didn't even know I had that patient on board. They knew I had more people because I had reported how many people were on board. I didn't say that I had another patient because I had the doctor with me. She had all the paperwork and everything. So yeah, they were they asked a couple of questions and they got it and understood what was going on and everything. So it's pretty cool.
Took off with 4, landed with 5. That's probably not a lot of people that can say that.
Yeah,
that's
fun.
Amazing. Wow, that's a tough one to top. That's pretty good. What about? Tell us one where maybe weather or there was a challenge like operating the airplane. Like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've had to face?
Obviously, like I said, 20 feet of rain a year in the rainforest there. We're in the Amazon basin. We lived at 3,500 feet above sea level, right on the edge of the Andes. So our weather was was actually fairly cool. I mean, a hot day would maybe be in the 80s, but it was typically cool at night because of the rain. It was really a nice temperature, nice place to live. But because we were right there with all that moisture coming up from the Amazon basin, it just dumped rain all the time. So we were constantly struggling to shoot a VOR approach down to 500 feet and about a mile out, to be able to get into to our home base and where people could get help. And I'd say the one that comes to mind when I think about challenge like that, we were in the process of bringing a Kodiak into our fleet there in Ecuador. And so I had been up in the States and done the transition training and then instructor training in the Kodiak, and then actually ferried the Kodiak down to Ecuador along with another pilot. And we were getting ready for the dedication, and we'd been having problems with the government trying to get all the paperwork done. They actually required a type rating in a Kodiak there, so we had to jump through a bunch of hoops to get a type rating. And we were actually having this huge dedication. We invited the major donor, the person that had provided most of the funds for our Kodiak. He had provided over $1 million towards this airplane. He was down. He and his wife were down for the event. We'd invited, all the dignitaries from civil aviation, from the community, from the church, from other operators on the field for this, major event on Saturday. We'd actually build a new hangar for the Kodiak. So it was this huge deal. So the Friday before that event, we were going to do a flight demo. So we were going to basically take the Kodiak and do a couple low passes, just to show the people short takeoff and landing stuff on the runway. And so we were really excited about it. So that after the day before Friday, we had a normal flight schedule, and it just rained and rained and rained all day. And we had doctors from the Ministry of Health that were out in the communities that were supposed to come out that day. And so right at the end of the day, about 3:00, 3:30, we're on the equator, so it gets dark at 6:30 year round. So you've got, sunset limits that you need to respect. So we finally, it kind of opens up. And as was often the case, we kind of called it a sucker hole. It'd kind of open up for just an hour or something. And if you could get out and get back, you'd be okay, but then it would shut down again. So two of us in two different 206s, we took off. It was actually the other pilot that was going to do the demo flight with me, the other Kodiak pilot, myself. We took off in two of the 206s, headed out to get a group of doctors, different communities. I picked mine up, turn around, I start heading in, and they're like, on the radio, they said, Shell was our base. It's closed down, and like a 135, we had to have minimums to be able to even shoot the approach. So we couldn't even go in and give a look or try. And so I landed in another community. The weather was fine out in the jungle. So I landed in the community, and I had this group of doctors, and these were actually doctors from Cuba who have been, the Ecuadorian government, pays Cuba to have doctors come because they have a shortage of doctors. So these are, Cuban doctors, communists, obviously probably not Christians. They're in my airplane. I'm a missionary, right? What am I thinking about while I'm on the ground for like an hour and a half with these people? All I'm doing is looking at my watch. I'm like, I'm not having a conversation. I'm not building a relationship with these people. I'm not showing them that, anything about maybe what I believe or what they might think about an American versus my understanding of people in Cuba and anything. And all I'm thinking about is the weather. And I'm thinking, we've got this dedication tomorrow, and if I don't make it back, who's going to fly the airplane and everything? My mind is completely stuck on that. So finally, at about the last point that I could take off, be able to get into Shell and then still have time to get to my alternate, I just decided I'm going to take off. You know what? I'm a missionary. If God wants this to happen, he's going to open up the weather. It's going to work, right? So I take off. I head in. About the same time, the other pilot, I found he's on the radio. He's doing the same thing. The closer we get, the worse the weather gets. And they're just like, no, there's no way. So we both divert to a community. And again, it was in the Northeast. So it was a Warani community, a community we had lots of good friends in and people that we had worked with and had been in our airplanes a lot. So we land there, and I'm just like, man, again, my mind's just like, how are we going to get this dedication tomorrow? How are we going to get all this done? So we get there, and a lady comes up to the airplanes, a good friend of ours, and she's like, she understands we're going to be there for the night, right? So you have to understand, these people literally we're talking thatched roof huts, no electricity, no running water, nothing. They've got an HF radio that's ours that we put there in the community for them to communicate with us. And so she says, I'll take your passengers up. You guys can take care of the airplanes. I'll take them up to my house, and then I'll make supper for you. Which, again, understanding what it means for an indigenous person to say, I had 3, and I think the other pilot had 2 or 3. So, we got like 7 or 8 people that she's just going to spontaneously make supper for all these people and welcome us into her home. And which was an amazing thing in its own. So I get the plane kind of tied down, figured out what we're doing for the night, talking to the other pilot kind of about what our plan is, how soon we would try to get gone in the morning, because we're going to have to get there early to get showered and changed and get the Kodiak ready for the next day, and just praying the weather's going to be good in the morning. And so we get ready, get the airplanes ready. We go up to the house to have supper. We eat supper with our host. Her name is Minkai, and she's just a sweet, she's a health promoter. So she's worked in the healthcare system, and she's from that community. And at the end of supper, again, like I said before, my brain was completely caught up on the weather and pilot responsibilities that I had. And as we sat there having supper with these doctors, Minkai went into the story of how she became a Christian because of the missionaries that come to work in her community. And the Mission Aviation Fellowship had been the transporter of those missionaries to come and work, and how the difference that God had made in her life and in her family's life, and the fact that there are even people that are alive in the community because of the work that Mission Aviation Fellowship does, and because of the missionaries coming there. Because you can imagine, people that don't share our same faith don't always look favorably at missionaries, and they think, oh, you're going in and you're changing culture, and you're trying to push a religion down people's throats. We don't see it that way. We see it that we're there to relieve suffering. We're providing what we say is hope, health, and healing. We do it in Jesus' name, but we're not pushing religion down people's throats. But for her to just voluntarily give this testimony about how her family's life had been changed because of the work of MAF and the missionaries that had been there, honestly was embarrassing for me, because here I was as the quote unquote missionary, and I had done nothing to share what I believe or to even try to build a relationship with my passengers. And here was this dear friend of ours who just laid it all out in the line and said, my life and my family's life has been completely changed because of the work that the missionaries have done and what God has done in our lives. And you can look up the Warani and see their past and their history. In fact, one of our first pilots was killed by a warring party in 1956 in Ecuador. And so, there's a long history of missions and that particular indigenous tribe. But for her to just lay that out there, it was just both embarrassing for me, but at the same time, it was so encouraging because it validated what we had been doing and trying to do. And she wasn't telling me, she was telling a complete stranger about the change in her life. And so the next day we woke up, and of course the weather was gorgeous. It was beautiful. We took off at 6:30. We were on the ground, back in time to do the whole dedication, all the things that I was worried about. And as a Christian, I should have been willing to just say, hey, God, you're in control of this. I can just, rest and not worry about it. But I wasn't able to do that. And he took care of all those details. And I hope had an impact on those people, those passengers that were with us, to see that we were there doing more than just flying people around and making money using the airplane there.
Well, I think that just delivers such a great way to kind of wrap up what it is that you guys are doing, and
yeah, it all kind of brings it together.
It ties it all together really well. And yeah, I mean, look, you're not going to make the most money. You're not going to have the most time off. You're not going to fly maybe to the most exotic destinations. But if there's more, if you want more from your work and you want to have an impact, even maybe when you're not on purpose doing something, but you're in the right place at the right time, I think it's a special calling for folks. And so I think that's why we were excited to talk to you, Chad, and learn more about this. So if people are moved by your message, or maybe they think, this sounds like something I'd like to learn more about, this would be a cool career for me, or maybe I just want to support missionary aviation, how can folks learn more about the different options out there?
The easiest way is to go to our website, obviously, at maf.org. And you can just go there. There's lists on how to serve. You can look up a missionary list. You can find a missionary who maybe has a background. If you're interested in supporting a missionary, you can find a missionary maybe that's from your part of the U.S., or he's serving in a country that you've gone to on a missions trip, or you are interested in helping, and you can find people that you can support. There's also information on how to serve, what our requirements are for pilots and for mechanics, and our mobilization department and stuff. You can look all that up. There are also links to videos, other organizations that we serve, the countries that we serve in. All of that stuff's on our website at maf.org. So you can really get a good taste. And there's obviously all the contact information there about how to contact somebody if you're interested in that.
All right. Chad Irwin, Director of Operations for Mission Aviation Fellowship. Appreciate you coming on, sharing a little bit about what it is you guys do. And thank you very much for the impact that you're making in this world.
Yeah. Thanks for doing the work you do. And thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure. It was fun.
That does it for our interview with Chad on the Mission Aviation Fellowship and the inner workings. I don't know about you, Dylan, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, great stories. And just it's exciting to hear somebody using aviation to really profoundly impact people's lives. It really gives you good perspective when everything we see online is, we need a contract right now, the direct contribution, blah, 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 and then you're like,
right.
Okay, there's also people doing stuff with airplanes that's a little bit different. So
yeah, puts things in perspective.
Aviation.
That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, Chad, and all of the pilots at MAF for all of the amazing services you're providing folks around the globe.
All right, what's next?
Should we do some flight advice?
Okay, I'm ready to bestow some more of my vast
okay.
this cornucopia of knowledge that I possess in my head. I will weave a tapestry of beautiful advice, Dylan, and then you just crush it with your mud ball you're going to throw.
Rip it, bro. Smoke him if you got him.
Yeah, bro. Don't calculate performance, idiot.
Okay, well, here's some advice we can both agree on, and that is that you need to visit harveywatt.com to see all of the offerings that are available for pilots. It doesn't matter if you're in the 121 world, business aviation, or anything in between. You need to protect that medical certificate that allows you to earn a paycheck with that pilot's license.
Oh, it's interesting. So that book I was telling you I started reading, one of the things he was talking about was the medicals for pilots. And this was like in the 40s when he was first getting his medical. And one of the tests that they used to have to do back then for you to pass a medical exam, they had a depth perception test where you had two sticks on a string and you had to pull the strings and keep the sticks aligned next to each other. And then they finally realized that what he said, that depth perception wasn't really that important, so they just dropped the test. But he's like, people used to fail that all the time. Like, how many people's aviation dreams were just crushed by this stupid stick on a string test that everybody failed? So
wow.
And then he went on to say basically that it's ridiculous and people that are past their medicals die the next day, and there's all these crazy stories. It doesn't really do anything but put a thorn in everyone's side. But it is what it is, so you have to protect yourself. HarveyWatt.com.
All right, Joel, we're ready.
I wanted to start by saying that I began listening to the podcast a few months ago, and I haven't missed a new episode yet. I really enjoy listening to you guys and really appreciate all of the time that you all put in the podcast. It's very informative, and so many aviators and their significant others can really relate to what you have to say. I've had my wife listen to some of the episodes, and she loved them. I'm about to ask a question that I'm sure you guys have answered many times, so I apologize, but gonna ask it anyway. I am a regional FO at American Airlines, fully owned, and have a question about commuting or staying in base. I currently live in a base, about a 15-minute drive on a bad day and a 7-minute drive on a good day. We all know that these are unprecedented times in aviation with hiring pilots, and I wanted to get your opinion before even starting an application process. As of now, my quality of life is incredible. I work as much or as little as I want. My wife has a job that she really enjoys, and I'm making more than enough money for the type of life that we live. We believe that this city is going to be our forever home with how good everything is. Recently, I've had quite a few friends leave this regional for a low-cost carrier and boast about how great everything is, even though they have to commute. So I have started to develop a feeling of FOMO. My dilemma is, do I stay where I'm at, continue with the great money and great quality of life, upgrade and wait for the flow, or apply outside of the flow, or maybe try a low-cost carrier for a short term and then try and jump to the legacy? I have so many people tell me to get out of the regionals as quickly as possible, but I don't personally see anything wrong with staying for a while if you're happy and your quality of life is great. Am I crazy for thinking like this, or is this a smart way of going about things? Whether you put this question on the podcast or not, thanks for taking the time to read this. Best regards, RJ.
Okay, I wrote a little follow-up email to RJ and asked him what city he lived in because I think that's important information. And it's Charlotte.
Okay. Well, I guess he's asking for advice. So that's when you say what you would do, right? And what I would do is I would upgrade and put in my stuff at American and try and get a job there to be based in Charlotte. Like for me, the number one thing about the airline I choose would be if they have a base where I want to live.
Yes.
That's number one for me. And I have obviously very strong feelings about commuting. And it's just not something I would do. I would quit a job at a legacy that I had a few years of seniority in to go work at another one that had a base where I lived or where I wanted to live or, where I was planning on living. Like that's how important it is to me because it's a different job. Driving to work is a different job than commuting, period. It just is. People that commute or don't commute, there's no arguing that. It is different. So that would be my move. What do you think?
Well, so I actually called somebody to because I've been giving such terrible advice. I actually
you phoned a friend finally and get out of this rut you're in.
Exactly. Yeah. Because
you can tell this guy to quit and become an accountant. Is that your advice?
Yeah.
Sorry. All right, go ahead.
Exactly. So, because my original advice would have been stay at the regional and enjoy, and you'll get there when you get there, because here's the thing that I don't think you and I probably don't understand enough is like how if you work for a wholly owned, how that like flow process works up to American.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about that.
It's not like you just apply. So I actually called somebody that knows a lot about this, and here is what he said, a few interesting nuggets that maybe you and I aren't aware of. Number one, the worst thing you can do as a regional pilot is go work for the wholly owned of the major that you want to work for.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Majors that is their last priority is to hire their own feeder pilots, which makes sense. The fastest way to get hired by a major is to be a low-cost carrier pilot. Number one, you've got a type rating in a bigger airplane. And number two, they are taking advantage of their competition, taking the pilots. So when I mentioned I was in Challenger 350 training, and one of the guys that I was in training with was a Frontier FO, and he had been there for about 6 months. 50% of his class had already been hired by a major and gone.
Not so low cost anymore when the training costs are like through the roof.
And they basically just have to embrace it. He says their strategy has shifted to we're going to hire whoever we can get. Hopefully we'll find people that really enjoy the low-cost carrier stuff and they'll stay. And we'll just take the people that stay. Great. And then we know that a lot of people are going to move on.
Isn't that crazy? Do you and you can get away with that, I think, when fare prices are so high and the profitability. But so I heard a real number, and of course this varies a little bit from airline to airline, but basically to hire somebody and get them through training, IOE, the whole deal, till they're actually generate revenue and are productive is about $75,000, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that's
massive.
Plus or minus whatever, $5,000 or something. But for an airline today, right now, it's about $75,000. I mean, can you imagine going through $75,000 at a time with that many people leaving? But luckily the profitability of the airlines can support that, I think, right now. But we'll see what happens.
So basically, in a nutshell, if the fastest way to get back to American sounds like it's probably going to be to go to a low-cost carrier, but you're going to have to suck it up and you're going to have to commute. And oh, by the way, low-cost carriers fly a lot of red eyes. They fly a lot of kind of odd hours. So commuting might even be more difficult than you might think versus a regular, like a regional.
But one of the things is too, you have to, in airline flying, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? Yeah. In a lot of respects. And that means if you think there's no way you're ever going to escape commuting your entire career. I suppose it's possible, but there's a very, very small chance of that happening. Yep. You will commute. The good thing about commuting is it really makes you appreciate living in base. Yeah. It kind of reminds you, especially like if you're been an FO for a long time and you've been having this cush schedule and then you upgrade to captain, you have to commute for a while, it kind of reminds you of how good it is to live in base. But for him, he's got it good and stuff at the regional. But again, if it's a quality of life thing, which I'm kind of all about, ultimately making it to the legacy carrier in base is going to provide you the best quality of life long term. And so you have to figure out how you're going to get there. And that's the advice is, I think, good that you phoned a friend about. Yeah.
And it's hard to know exactly all the details of he didn't mention kids or anything. I'm assuming he's younger. If you're going to commute, this is probably the time to do it right now. It might only be a few months, the way things are going.
The way things are moving, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other point is too, and Max, we've brought this up many times, if the music does stop, you'd probably rather be at a LCC than a regional.
Yeah.
That's our advice. And we are getting a lot of this similar email. So I think every everybody's a little bit different in their situation. I think this one's very clear cut because this pilot lives in an American Airlines major city. There's probably more factors to consider if you live somewhere else. This is probably, for these types of situations, talking to a career coach who knows the ins and outs of all of the flows and how all that works probably is worth the money.
No, for sure is worth the money.
For sure worth the money.
There was the bad advice right there. Yeah. It's probably worth the money to make a decision that's going to affect the rest of your career. It might be worth,
maybe worth,
definitely worth it.
So thanks for writing in, RJ. Best of luck. Let us know what happens. And this is a great time to be moving up the ladder. So good luck. If you need some flight advice, mostly good advice with just a little bit of bad advice at the end, you can write us in info@215podcast.com or visit the website and fill out the anonymous form for flight advice. That's it. Brought to you by Harvey Watt. Thank you, Harvey Watt. I think that's going to do it, Max, for episode 95. Anything else you need? Any more wisdom you need to?
All for now, Dylan. I will bestow more wisdom upon you in the next episode.
Okay. We would like to thank everyone who contributed to the show, folks that wrote into the mailbag, reviews, flight advice. Of course, our sponsors, Timothy P. Pope, certified financial planner for professional pilots throughout the United States. Harvey Watt in Advanced Aircrew Academy. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Until then, remember,
flexibility is the key to air power, and no abusing our boy Joel. Thank you.
Please give him a ride in a PC-12.
Somebody.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.